That's great.
All right, guys, we are in class 4 of ICHRA. So, Courtney, I'm going to let you take over. This is all yours.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. All right, I will share my screen. And I will say that I'll give Luis a copy of this to give to all of you after our time together today. This is our ICHRA compliance, where we're going to navigate the individual coverage HRA compliance A to Z. I do have to give you a disclaimer before I start today, which is that this material is for general information purposes only, not to be considered or taken as legal, tax, benefit, or human resources advice. Please consult a licensed broker, human resource certified expert, or attorney for specific guidance. Okay, now that we have that out of the way, I do want to hear from you guys throughout our time together. So please feel free to send your questions into the chat or come off mute. I will say that this is a pretty heavy content lift. So there might be some times where I keep moving right on through and just hold your questions until the end of that section, just to make sure that we get through all of the content. All right, so we have 5 areas of topic to discuss today. What is an ICHRA? Some general contribution information, next spend specific strategies, some affordability information, and legalities in reporting. I'm confident that many of us already know what an ICHRA is. We spent some time together going through why ICHRAs are important to the expanding marketplace, right? They're a defined contribution strategy that allow the employer to set a defined contribution amount and allow the employee to choose the coverage based on their needs. So as we see these come into the market, we recognize that they allow for greater cost control from the employer. They allow increased flexibility in plan design, especially when we're thinking about who is eligible to participate in the ICHRA. And they allow freedom of choice because now we have employees with different needs being able to select the policy that actually meets their needs, rather than just a one size that may or may not fit most anyway, right? So contribution basics. Some of this might be a little bit of a refresh, but I think it's important that we just take a moment to talk about. So when an employer says, yes, I want to go with an ICHRA, the first step is for the employer to determine their annual budget and how much they want to provide employees on a monthly basis for reimbursement. When the employer is setting their contribution amount, there's no minimum or maximum requirement. They just need to keep in mind that there's no carryover for month to month or year to year, and the employer is going to retain any of those unused contributions. Now, within a class of employees, or I should add, different contribution allowances may be offered to different employee classes. We'll take a look at those classes in just a moment. However, within a class, different contribution allowances can only be offered based on age or family size. In addition, although ICHRAs in general can reimburse insurance premiums only and or qualified medical expenses, with the Next Spend ICHRA solution, we're going to focus on reimbursing for insurance premiums only. And if we think back to the payment solution, right, the payment portion of the Next Spend ICHRA, reimbursing for insurance premium only is what allows us to create the streamlined payment process. All right, so Does anyone remember any of the 11 classes that can be used to define employee eligibility? If you want to shout them out or jump them into the chat, just curious if anyone can recall what one of the eligible employee classes could be. I'll give you some hints. Employers may, yeah, part-time and full-time, love it. Seasonal salaried. Employers can structure their monthly contribution based on these 11 classes that have been defined by ICHRA regulation. Now, employers can utilize these 11 classes if an employer chooses to keep a traditional group health plan alongside of an ICHRA. Two things have to occur. One, there's no commingling of classes. That means that if I'm going to say all of my full-time employees have access to the traditional group health plan and all of my part-time employees are eligible to participate in the ICHRA, then that's how we have to keep it defined, right? We have to keep it equal along class lines. The second thing, if they choose to keep the traditional group health plan, the classes must be larger than 10 employees for an employer with less than 100 employees, 10% of the total number of employees for an employer with 100 to 200 employees, or 20 employees for an employer with greater than 200 employees. Age-based contributions, right? I mentioned that earlier on, but there's a key element to remember here for age-based contributions, which is in order to ensure the offerings do not discriminate, if the employer chooses to allow age-based contributions, it cannot exceed a 1-to-3 ratio from the youngest to the oldest employee in that class. So what that means is the employer can say, I want to contribute $100 to the youngest employee in that class, and I want to contribute $300 to the oldest employee in that class. We cannot exceed a 1-to-3 ratio. All right, so let's think about what you're going to see in the NextBend platform when you're having these conversations with employer groups about the strategy that best fits their needs. We have 3 main strategies we're going to discuss today. Employee only, which at its simplest form means I'm going to contribute $300 to all of my eligible employees. We have relationship, which means I'm going to vary amounts based on the employee, spouse, and child. And in that strategy, you can also use age banding to accompany that. Or I'm going to use a tiering structure to create categories where I can contribute to the different members of the household. All right, let's talk about strategy 1. Defined contribution employee only, where we're saying, you know what, I'm going to give all of my eligible employees in this class $350 per month. This number represents the maximum amount employers would like to contribute to each employee on a monthly basis. Now, if an employee selects a policy that is less than the defined contribution, let's say they select a policy that's $300 a month, the contribution does not carry over to the following month. Let's say the total monthly premium for that employee is more than the defined contribution. Maybe it's $500 a month. The employee would then be responsible for paying the remainder, and it would be eligible to be payroll deducted. So when I think about a defined contribution employee only strategy, what comes to mind for me is the simple and easy administration. By selecting this strategy, employers keep their contribution straightforward and easy to explain to their employees and easy to budget. So if you have an employer that may be very budget conscious, they're pretty small in nature, maybe all of the employees are around the same age, or maybe all of the employees are located in a similar rating area, you can still create a very equitable contribution by using an employee only strategy. Again, it's just taking in the considerations of that particular employer group. Now, with strategy one, you can also use age banding. So it's contributing to the employee only based on age. Again, we just have to make sure that we're staying within that 1-to-3 ratio of the oldest or the youngest to the oldest employee within that class. So you can see in this scenario, we have $200 versus $600 based on the age banding. Now, this strategy might be used by an employer group who understands that individual health insurance policies increase based on age. They only want to contribute to the employee, but they want to make sure their contribution is equitable for all of their employees. So using that 1-to-3 ratio would allow them to do so. And I want to call out that in the NextBend platform, when using an age banding strategy, the platform does have the logic built in to keep the employer within that 1-to-3 ratio. All right, but let's talk a little bit about strategy number 2, that defined contribution by relationship. So let's say the employer decides they want to give $500 to an employee, maybe $300 to a spouse, and $100 per dependent child, right? So this type of strategy allows the employer to contribute not only to the costs of premium for the employee, but also the other members on the contract. So you may have employer groups who understand the more people on a policy, the higher that premium is going to be. And they want to use their ICHRA contribution as a strategy to help offset some of those additional costs. With strategy number 2, you can also use age bandings. So you can see on this chart that we've kept those same age bands from strategy number 1, $200 to $600 a month. But now we've also added a contribution for the spouse and children. So now this type of strategy allows the employer to be ICHRA compliant with their 1-to-3 ratio, but also help offset those costs for some of the different contract members. So when we think about a defined contribution by relationship, it really comes into play how the employer wants to help offset some of those costs for the additional contract members. Again, if this might be an employer group who already is offering health benefits to their employers or employees and their spouse or dependents. They want to keep that contribution that way. They understand the value of that contribution as a recruiting and retaining tool. So they want to make sure that they're keeping that strategy. What about defined contribution by tier? This is our third strategy, and with this strategy, employers provide employees and their dependents a contribution based on categories. And those categories are employee only, employee plus a spouse or domestic partner, employee plus one child or dependent, employee plus multiple children or dependents, and a family. Now, the way the platform structures this defined contribution by tier is when these dollar amounts are being put into the platform, it's looking for the dollars to either remain the same or increase based on category type. So the platform will provide an error message if the contributions are listed in a descending order. The idea is that the employer wants to provide more of a contribution to those contract types that have a higher number of members on them. Now, who might choose or who might benefit from a tiering strategy? Again, it goes back to that ability to create customized contribution amounts, so you're still able to contribute to the employee, their spouse, and their dependents, but now you have removed the need to create age bands. So it's a more simplified strategy that allows the employer to still contribute to the employee and other members of the contract. All right, so I have a couple of scenarios I want to walk us through. I would love to see in the chat either A, B, C, or I don't know if their D is even an option on here, but two things. These are all opinions. I want you to have an opinion, but what that means is there's no right or wrong, right? The beauty of an ICHRA and the ability to structure the contribution is really getting to know the specific needs of that employer group. So what I might list as the right or correct answer, you may think is the complete opposite, and that's okay. So here's my first, who would benefit, right? So let's think back to the defined contribution for employee only. This is the straightforward, I want to give all of my eligible employees $350. So who do you think would benefit from strategy one? Go ahead and put A, B, or C into the chat. A, employers in highly competitive labor situations or locations in multiple states or rating areas. Applicable large employers who could face IRS penalties for not offering coverage, or maybe an employer with 2 or more FTEs looking for a greater cost control. What do we think? B, you could definitely make an argument for B, right? They want to avoid IRS penalties, so they're going to make sure that their contribution meets affordability requirements for all of the employees. I could see that. I took a more general approach and just said, hey, that's the most simple strategy. Could be for any employer looking for greater cost control. Okay. All right, so then what if we want to utilize age banding? So this is where we're contributing to the employee only, but now we're going to create age bands for those employees. So I personally think in this one, it goes back to that large employer looking to offer equitable coverage for all employees, because now we're able to remain compliant but create that equitable coverage. You could argue A, right? Small employers struggling with the administrative liability, for sure, right? Because now the employer is able to set their monthly healthcare budget consistently, for sure. All right, the defined contribution by relationship. So this was where the employer could say, based on employee, spouse, and dependent, I'll set my dollar amount. What do we think? If the employer is thinking, I want to give $300 to the employee, $200 to the spouse, and $100 per child. I don't know. This one, I think you could go with all of them. I actually wasn't the one who wrote this question. If I were the one who wrote this question, I think I would actually choose C. We'll find out. All right. Now we're doing our tier. This is our last question. So this was defined contribution by tier, where we created those categories of employees as employees plus employee only, employee plus spouse, employee plus child, employee plus children, or family. Who do we think could benefit from strategy 3? Any of them, really. I think you could argue, but in this particular question, we went with a warehouse factory with over 100 employees, simply because tier allows the employer to still contribute to the employee and their dependents, but it takes away that need to create the age bands, and it takes away the need to be mindful of that 1-to-3 ratio. So the tier is a more simplified way for the employer to contribute to the employee and members of their household. All right. Any questions? I don't see any that have come into the chat. But what can I answer?
Doesn't look like we have any yet, Courtney.
Well, I can guarantee we're going to have some after this
I'm
section.
thinking so.
All right. So I broke this out to kind of 2 streams of thought when we're talking about affordability testing and ICHRAs. So really there's two areas. Does the employer meet affordability requirements as an ALE to avoid penalties? On the other side, does the employee qualify for a premium tax credit? Those are kind of the 2 components that I think of when I talk about affordability and ICHRAs. So first, we're going to look at determining if a plan meets affordability requirements for ALEs. These are applicable large employers, 50 or more FTEs, that will be subject to shared responsibility payments. So, under the Affordable Care Act, employers with more than 50 full-time equivalent employees must offer health coverage that meets 2 mandate requirements. The first is that the health coverage is offered to substantially all full-time employees. And the second is that it is affordable. So when we say substantially all, we're talking about 95% or more. So when we're and I should go back a slide actually. So the employer, as I mentioned, could be subject to steep penalties. We're going to go through how steep those are for failing to meet one of these two requirements listed on the slide. Each requirement has their own set of criteria and could result in either penalty A or penalty B. So we're going to go through the calculation for penalty A, then we'll go through the calculation for penalty B. So the calculation for penalty A will ask a series of questions. First, does the employer group offer all full-time employees MEC, which stands for minimum essential coverage? If the employer answers no, the next question is, does the employer offer all but 5% of full-time employees minimum essential coverage? If the employer answers no again, the last question is, does the full-time employee get a subsidy? If the employer answers yes, then the penalty calculation for 2023 is $240 per month multiplied by the number of full-time employees taking the subsidy minus 30. So this calculation is the monthly penalty the employer group will pay if full-time employees receive a subsidy. Now, $240 per month might not seem like a lot, but it calculates out to $2,880 annually per employee for 2023. So that number can be indexed annually. And so penalty A can create a large cost for employers who fail to offer minimum essential coverage to at least 95% of their full-time employees. Now, if the employer managed to avoid penalty A, we have to consider penalty B. So this is again a series of questions. The first question is the coverage offered greater than or equal to 60% minimum value. I want to add a little asterisk here, a little caveat here. With an ICHRA, the policies that the individuals are selecting are going to be individual policies that are available meeting ACA mandates. So the employer knows that their coverage is going to meet the minimum value. Right? But let's play along. So if they said no, does the full-time employee get a subsidy? If they say no, then there's no penalty B. If they do get a subsidy or the coverage is deemed unaffordable, if the employee waives coverage and receives a subsidy, then the employer could be responsible for the penalty B calculation. Now, the penalty for the payment for penalty B is $360 per employee per month, which calculates out to $4,320 per employee per year for 2023. So it is very important for those applicable large employers to take into consideration, is the policy that I'm or is my contribution that I'm offering my employees meeting affordability requirements. For your small groups, this isn't a consideration because they're not going to be liable for penalty A or penalty B. Again, this is specific to those ALEs or applicable large employers. Linda, is there anything you'd like to add to that section?
I don't know anything to add, but when speaking to groups, I would just say, I find when I'm talking to them, I always say, number one, are you offering coverage? Number two, is it considered affordable?
Mhm.
There are 2 fines that a group can be penalized, fined. There are 2 different components to it. A lot of groups do not realize that up front until they get fined.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, by no means do I agree. Probably a less is more information at the beginning of the conversation to help navigate the conversation first before you get into the weeds. I just wanted to help make sure that you knew or understood how the affordability
Hey, Courtney, I'm going to
penalties.
add to that.
Yeah.
So on the group, if they want a true group plan, one of the things you've got to make them aware of, and this is how I kind of weed them out before I actually go through some work and get them done, is they want a group plan. Like, great, we can get you a group plan. Yes, you can get a PPO and HMO, and we can get you all the big national carriers. But let me tell you this. This is more or less, and this is just kind of a rule of thumb. If you're going to run, let's just say it's a young, healthy group, you can expect premiums to be approximately around $600 a month for a middle of the road, like kind of a silver type level group plan. Now, the employer is going to be responsible, at least in Texas, they got to pay 50% of that employee only premium. So this is what I would tell the employer. Look, you got, and then I see the message here, 12 employees. So let's do some simple math before we go through the work here. Assuming that your group is young and healthy and you get a $600 a month premium, it could fluctuate a little bit above, a little bit below that. You're responsible for half of that 600 employee only. So half of 600 is 300. 300 times 12 is $3,600 a month. Mr. Employer, do you want to pay $3,600 a month for this group plan you want to offer? If they say, yeah, you know what? Okay, now maybe group becomes an option along with the ICHRA. If the employer says, oh, hell no, I can't afford that, then don't even mess with trying to get a true group quote, because you're not, if you find something cheaper, it's probably going to have, it's going to be like a bronze plan with a very high deductible, very high out of pocket, stripped down kind of policy, maybe even an HMO. And I don't think I've seen a group premium for an employee under like 400 and change, and that's for a crappy type of plan. So at least you can eliminate the group issue and focus on ICHRA, which is going to be individually for everybody.
Yeah. Great call out.
Okay. Hope that helps you out there.
Thank you. And I do see the other question, isn't our focus employers 50 or less? Your focus is most likely that, but I just wanted to make sure you had all of the information in case, an ALA came your way, right? You just wanted you to be prepared. Okay, so let's move on to the other side of the coin, where is affordability testing for the employee, determining how an ICHRA impacts premium tax credits for employees. I'm going to go through a lot of information, and then I'm going to break it down with a couple of scenario examples. First, let's talk about the affordability calculation. So ICHRAs are considered affordable for an employee if the lowest cost silver plan for self-coverage only, minus the amount made available to the employee under the ICHRA, is less than 9.12% of 1/12 of the employee's annual household income. We're only looking at the employee. Now that percentage rate is indexed annually as well, and what you're looking at applies to 2023. Now, if the employer is trying to create an affordability calculation for the employee, they could use a couple of safe harbors to determine their annual income, which they can use their W-2 wages, the rate of pay, or the federal poverty line. Now, so here's another look at that calculation. So we're trying to get to what X is. So we'll take A being the annual household income, divide it by 12, and multiply it by 0.0912. And then what we're going to do is subtract it from the lowest cost silver plan. So that's the calculation we'll do when we get to our examples. But what I want to talk about is how that can impact the premium tax credits. So if the ICHRA benefit offered by the employer is deemed unaffordable, employees may waive enrollment in the ICHRA and claim any premium tax credits through a federal or state-based health insurance exchange. If the benefit offered by the employer is deemed affordable, employees may not claim premium tax credits even if they opt out of the ICHRA and purchase coverage through the exchange. And finally, no opt-out means no premium tax credits, regardless of the ICHRA's affordability. If an employee does not opt out of their ICHRA, they will not be eligible for a premium tax credit. I want to call out all of that information came directly from our ICHRA guide. And if you haven't accessed it already, I'll make sure to get a link to our resource hub, which has the ICHRA guide and the contribution and affordability strategy guide. It's going to be great help when navigating this information. And then another piece I want to touch on is how ICHRA plans and the family glitch fix intersect. So the family glitch fix, I'll explain it a little bit. It allowed previously, before the glitch was fixed, if the coverage was deemed affordable for the employee, then the spouse and dependent could not go on the exchange and qualify for a premium tax credit. So it left many people facing premiums that were simply not affordable to them and no other real option. So the family glitch fix changes that. Now, if the contribution for the employee is considered affordable, but it's considered unaffordable for the spouse and dependents, they can go on exchange to see if they qualify for a premium tax credit or a subsidy. A little bit more detail about an ICHRA specifically. And again, this information is also in our ICHRA guide. With an ICHRA, if the employee is responsible for paying a remainder, the employee may pay that remainder pre-tax through an employer's cafeteria plan if the policy was purchased off exchange. And the employer has to add specific language to their cafeteria plan in order for that to happen. Now, if the policy is purchased on exchange, it's going to be a post-tax deduction. Employee only. That is the caveat here, right? So what the family glitch allows is for the employee to say, you know, spouse, dependents, my ICHRA is eligible, or my ICHRA is deemed affordable for me, but it doesn't meet affordability for you. So I'm the employee. I'm going to stay on my employer's ICHRA and use my employer's contribution to pay for my policy. Any remainder that I have can be pre-tax payroll deducted. The spouse and dependent can go on the marketplace and shop for a policy. And what they do is, by doing that, they're removed from the ICHRA and they can no longer have the cost of their individual policy reimbursed through the ICHRA, right? So they no longer have an ICHRA remainder that can be payroll deducted. What that means is that the spouse and dependent must work with the exchange to receive that individual coverage. Any premium cost over the subsidy is the individual's responsibility and must be paid through outside of the ICHRA and not through the cafeteria plan. I know I just said a lot, so I want to pause here and see if there are any questions. Linda, do you have anything to add?
No, I mean, that is an area that is, the family glitch is a positive.
Mm-hmm.
Utilizing it can get very, all I can say is make sure you understand it before you start talking it with a group.
Right. It is a positive fix. It was a
It
good thing
is.
that it was fixed. I just wanted to make sure that I gave the full story in case the topic does come up. All right, so let's look at a couple of examples. We have Green Garden Nursery. They are offering a $350 employee only monthly contribution. Mary is an employee of Green Garden Nursery and she has an income of $50,000. Based on her rating area, the lowest cost silver plan available is $600 a month. So let's do the affordability calculation. We're going to take her annual income of $50,000, divide it by 12, and multiply it by 0.0912. That gives us $380. So we'll take $600, the lowest cost silver plan, subtract the $380, which brings us to $220. So what does that mean? That means that the employer's contribution of $350 is above the $220 affordability limit for Mary. Therefore, yes, this employer is meeting the affordability requirements for Mary. Mary is not eligible to waive the ICHRA and go on Marketplace to shop for a subsidy. However, Mary can purchase an individual policy, participate in her ICHRA. Now, let's say Mary purchases a policy that is above her employer's contribution. Not a problem. That remainder can be pre-tax payroll deducted from her paycheck. All right, let's talk about another employee of Green Garden Nursery. We have
Just
Jack.
real quick, Courtney,
yeah.
I want to, Shri actually put a message in there. Does
Oh.
Next Spend set up calculations? We do not set up calculations, but we do have what's called an affordability spreadsheet. At this time, let me say at this time, we're always enhancing our platform, but I do have an affordability spreadsheet I'm always happy to share.
Yeah.
That you guys, you can take and you can figure it out really quickly using the spreadsheet.
It's a great call out. Yeah, I'm not an Excel wizard, but that spreadsheet is really simple to use. So thank you. All right, let's look at Jack. So Jack is also an employee of Green Garden Nursery. His affordability calculation looks a little bit different. His household income is substantially less, and his lowest cost silver plan is more. So when we do Jack's affordability calculation, we're going to take $35,000, divide it by 12, and multiply it by 0.0912, which is going to give us $266. We'll subtract that from the lowest cost silver plan in his area, which is $650. So that gives us a total of $384. That's a little bit of a problem because we remember the employer's contribution was $350. Therefore, yes, in this scenario, Jack can opt out of the ICHRA, go on exchange, and receive a premium tax credit. Potentially, if this happens and the employer is an ALE, they could be assessed a shared responsibility payment by the IRS. Perfect. Yes, we'll make sure we get that over to you, the spreadsheet. All right, so here is a knowledge check. We can think back a couple of slides. What is the correct formula? A, B, C, or D? A, X equals A divided by 12, where A is the employee's annual income. B, where X equals A multiplied by 12, where A is the employee's annual income. C, A is the lowest cost silver plan, or D, A is the lowest cost silver plan. Anyone remember the affordability calculation? That's okay. It's A. A equals the annual household employee income. So we'll divide that by 12 and multiply it by 0.0912, which is the affordability percentage for 2023. Again, that number is indexed annually. All right. We only have about 7 minutes left, and I do have quite a bit to cover in this section. I know that some of you may have a hard stop at the top of the hour, so I'm going to be cognizant of your time as I go through this information. The thing to remember is the ICHRA itself is a group health plan, which means that it's subject to many of the same general legal requirements as a traditional group health plan. So there's a lot of administration that goes on with this in the background. It can look overwhelming if you have it all on one screen. However, employers don't have to go it alone. They have their broker, they have NextSpend and the platform, and they have their administrators. You know, they might already have, if group size requires it, a COBRA administrator and things like that. So this section is not meant to overwhelm the employer. It's simply meant to give them a high level of what can be expected in terms of reporting requirements. The first I would like to call out is the ERISA requirements. Those are the minimum established, the minimum standard for voluntarily established retirement plans. So it puts in protections for individuals. The main thing to call out is that an employer adopting an ICHRA is the ERISA plan administrator, and they're responsible for ensuring that ERISA requirements are met. So another piece to call out is COBRA and HIPAA requirements. HIPAA requirements protect information, right? That is a federal law that helps make sure that the information is being disclosed and utilized properly. So it's really put into place to protect the employee and their information. COBRA is it generally applies to all private sector employer groups that have at least 20 or more employees on their payroll 50% or more of the typical business days in a calendar year. So again, a lot of the employer groups that you're working with may not need to meet COBRA requirements either way. However, the employer is responsible for COBRA administration if group size is met. Now, losing employment-based coverage gives the employee the opportunity to enroll on the health insurance marketplace. Individuals may be eligible for cost-sharing reductions and a tax credit. If so, since the individual policy itself is maintained by the employee, they may choose to keep the policy minus any employer contribution. All that to say is it really simplifies COBRA because the employee may choose to just keep their policy minus the employer contribution, kind of making it a moot point. Medicare. Couple of things I want to call out with Medicare. Premiums for Medicare Part A and B. Due to Centers for CMS constraints and how we work versus how CMS works, our two platforms don't talk nicely to each other. So there's some constraints there, meaning that NextBend's ICHRA solution is not going to support the facilitation of premium payments for Medicare Part A and Medicare Part B. However, these items are considered a reimbursable expense under the ICHRA. So if this scenario is a concern for the group, the individual and the employer should work out a reimbursement method. Because NextBend is going to reimburse for insurance premiums only, we are not required or concerned with Part D notices, as those are a notice regarding the reimburse of drug expense. And again, we reimburse for the insurance premium only. There are a couple of IRS filings that I want to mention. The first is the 1094 and 1095. These are required for those ALEs because this is how the IRS is going to calculate if they owe a penalty or not for affordability testing. All sized groups are responsible for the PCORI because all HRAs are considered self-insured plans in considering ICHRAs, including ICHRAs. So this fee is required to be reported once a year on the second quarter form 720 and to be paid by July 1st. Now we have a couple of plan documentation requirements, and these templates and standards are on the resource hub. So we have a SPD. So the summary plan description tells participants what the plan provides and how it operates. This information must be provided to the employee within 90 days of the employee being eligible for the plan. The basic plan document contains all of the elective and non-elective provisions of the plan. The adoption agreement contains options for the employer to complete based on their specific plan information. This is the document when we went through our demonstration of the NextBend platform that's going to be signed and loaded into the platform. Now, the employer should or can download this for their records as well. So NextBend will provide this along with the SPD. Now, employers are required to provide written notice to participants at least 90 calendar days prior to the beginning of the plan. This had been an exception based on the state of emergency issued due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Once we come out of that state of emergency, the 90-day notice is going to be impacted and may become a requirement. We do provide a 90-day notice template and an ICHRA attestation on the platform. The insurer may request an ICHRA attestation from the employer stating that they are offering an ICHRA to determine that they do meet the requirements of an SEP to enroll in an individual health insurance plan. All right. I know I sped through that last section, so I apologize. I know that Linda had to hop, but if anyone does have the ability to stay on, I'd love to answer questions. And I'll let Luis take it away.
Yeah, I don't see any on here right now. What do you think, Courtney? Are we going to end up doing one more?
So this is my last of the full curriculum that I have, but I would love to have a standing time where we can just come together and Linda and I can answer any questions. We are working on some sales materials. So I know we had talked about an elevator pitch.
Yes.
A deck that can be used, some of those items. So if it's applicable or appropriate, we can definitely keep maybe once a month some standing time together, whatever works on.
Why don't we do the once a month? I think that'll be good because I have these recorded and any new agents can just hop on and watch them. And then once a month, we can kind of look at the latest and greatest changes, a refresher on anything new, or maybe you guys develop some new stuff. But I definitely think that that collateral material would be great, that elevator speech, because that's what I get hit on quite a bit. And right now, what I do like is an agents are hitting me with ICHRA, I just forward them straight to Linda. And I'm just like, hey, Linda's your point of contact, get with her, and you sign the agreement, do what you got to do, and then you're rocking.
Perfect. Yes.
So, guys, any other questions? Oh, Jeremy, once a month sounds good.
Great. I love it.
So
well, then we'll work on it for getting the next one on our calendars then.
Okay. And in the meantime, I'll wait for some stuff you're going to send me. And if you've got any of their stuff, I have a folder created on our platform. And so I'll put that platform in there, all the materials you send, and agents can just grab them when they need them and do their thing.
Great. All right. Well, I will do my darndest to get you a follow-up email by the end of today.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. Thank you, Courtney. Thank you guys for being on today's call. I appreciate it.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.